What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into the bootleg tapes and official releases of the entire Frank Zappa live catalog. Currently deep diving into Winter 77, the second half of the tour he did with the band that we've already have a lot of representation from. Philly 76, Zappa in New York, the core band in the Zappa New York releases is this band. One of the releases in Zappa Erie, there was a 76 show. But a nice small band. Zappa doing what Zappa does, Bozio on drums, O'Hearn on bass, Eddie Jobson on keyboards and incredible violin solos, and then Ray White essentially being underused, though he starts to, on the better tapes, his rhythm guitar is kind of jumping out. There's a tape in here where I'm like, you can hear Ray White. It's awesome. And then he also starts to sing City of Tiny Lights in the middle of this tour, so that comes into happening a little more often. So I got two shows to talk about today as we continue this deep dive. January 28th, 1977 and January 30th, 77. It is in that latter show where I think Frank codifies what's going to be the set list for the rest of the tour, give or take a little treat, but it's pretty much been the exact same set list for every show. Each show starts off with Purple Lagoon, Peaches, Torture Never Stops, Big Leg Emma. We've gone back and forth with I'm the Slime and City of Tiny Lights in that second slot, and the show on the 30th, City of Tiny Lights, I think gets that for the remainder of the tour. Then we have a run of Pound for a Brown, which is a highlight of every show and is definitely the highlight of one of these shows. A Jones Crusher, My Guitar, Trying to Grow a Chin, Broken Hearts, Dung Work, Manx, Titties, Black Napkins. That's the same run through the main set of the show for the most part. I'm really, really enjoying listening to these. This is a surprisingly strong and consistent tour. The guitar playing is fascinating. The O'Hearn Bozio rhythm section is out of this world. Jobson's like main solo in Black Napkins is always a highlight. Sometimes it's better than Frank's accompanying Black Napkin solo. The only part that I'm like, when I'm listening to these, that it's like, okay, this again is that Broken Hearts, Dung Work for Yuta, which is done a cappella, which, considering the quality of some of these tapes sound-wise, these audience recordings in these like echoey halls, that could be a pretty painful 2 minutes. But then right in the middle of that, you get Manx Needs Women, which is just like a minute and a half of like mainlining pure prog Zappa Weird Sugar. And then Titties, which doesn't do anything for me. Every once in a while, I'll crack a smile on some of that middle interaction. But then Black Napkins is fantastic. And then the encores have been a mixed bag. We usually get a Dynamo Hum, but we've gotten some Camarillo Muffin Mans. On one of these shows, we get an I'm the Slime. One of these shows, we get a Willie the Pimp. So it's been interesting. So I'm going to talk about these two shows a little more in detail, and then I'm going to rank them among the other 8. First show, Brussels, January 28th, 77. The main thing that jumps out that is a complaint, Patrick O'Hearn is not as prominent in the mix as he is on some of these other tapes. I think the sound quality is pretty decent. You feel like you're in the venue for the most part. It's that kind of just, you're getting this flat sound where maybe every once in a while a soloist will jump out a little more during like a Black Napkins or something. My only complaint is there are shows with just agreeably worse sound quality where things are echoey, but O'Hearn is more prominent in the mix. I kind of like that better because O'Hearn is fantastic. But for this show, we get the standard set list, but with this one, we get I'm the Slime and City of Tiny Lights in that early slot. And then for the encore, we're not getting a Cruisin' for Burgers, which has popped up in the encore spot. We're getting a Willie the Pimp, which is fantastic. So we got a Purple, we got a Peaches, we got a Torture Never Stops, a really aggressive start to the solo in Torture Never Stops. The screams are really loud. They have the screams of, the woman moans from the studio version. Those are piped in pretty loud and are pretty prominent in this mix. Just that thump of O'Hearn and Bozio during the Torture solos is very prominent in here. But this is probably the most aggressive, heaviest Torture solo so far on this tour. This is definitely leaning more towards Fall 77 is very start off light and easy and then get heavy. 78 tends to be heavy from the start. This has definitely more of a Winter 78, just like we're going aggressive from the moment we start playing type solo, which is nice. Big Leg Emma, we get a cold stop And then Frank, call back to the previous video I did last week and the shows from the last video. Frank asks if anybody knows about the red berries of Hamburg. So again, if you know what those are, please explain them to me to the comments. I don't know what the red berries of Hamburg are, but I think that's pretty much the only time it comes up if Frank brings it up here. Then we get the I'm the Slime. Sounds more confident. Solo is really aggressive in a really, really cool way. Yeah, it's really good. But then the song kind of just ends and we got some dead air before we segue into City of Tiny Lights. But it's a good I'm the Slime for, I think, what will be the penultimate one until the 80s. We get a City of Tiny Lights. Really busy first half of this. Like, it just seems like everybody's on like 11 with the things they're playing and the fills they're doing, which it seems like as we go on, the first half becomes a little more streamlined, it feels, and a little more focused. This one kind of feels chaotic, but it works. We get a Ray solo. We get an O'Hearn solo. The O'Hearn solos are always just friggin' weird. Then we get a nice sort of vocal, not a vocal jam, but over and over and over. Like, Frank doesn't know how to end City of Tiny Lights at this point. Like, it just like, Ray just keeps going, how the peoples eat. And then Frank will rip off some lifts, how the peoples eat. And he just kind of plays with that phrase over and over and over until Frank's like, okay, let's go into Pound for a Brown. Pound for a Brown, the solo in this, just, it sounds just amazing. Just this core group playing this, and the Jobson guitar, the Jobson synth sounds are fantastic. The City of Tiny Lights, the Pound for a Brown solo, really nice and chill and light and kind of jazzy runs early on. Bozio's getting weird with the stuff he does, trying to push, like, you know, limits. Frank starts to get really playful after a while, but weirdly playful, and then he starts to get heavy. And we just have your typically strong, kind of exploratory Pound for a Brown. These really seem like they're not destined to get us from, like, the Torture solos always feel like they're starting, like they almost feel volcanic, like the intensity is meant to build due to the nature of torture. You want it to get worse, I guess. Never tortured anybody. But the Pound really just seems like he's in a room playing for however long he wants to, and everybody's free to do what they want. And it's not chaotic. There's definitely like a vamp that they're all like centered around, but there is a very playful energy to the Pound for a Brown. This is that. It has that energy, starts light and airy, gets heavy. Definitely maybe one of the shorter ones of the tour for the Pound, but still absolutely satisfying. We get a drum solo. Then we got Jones Crusher, my guitar. The guitars sound great in this. This is one of those, both of these songs early in the tour, some of the sound quality on the tapes was not that strong. You really couldn't make out what exactly was happening in these songs. On this tape, and especially on the next one, it is much clearer. Love the vamp for the guitar solo. It's pretty much just the same groove that's played for the vocals, and Frank just kind of drops in and delivers a short little burst of a solo. We get the Trying to Grow a Chin, a Broken Hearts. Ending is just way too long on this. Not this performance, this version. Frank just lets it go on. The "gonna move you fool yourself, girl," that just goes on for way too long. We get that little playful doo-wop section. We get the Dong Work for You, Yoda. It's not for Yoda. It's not. Manx Needs Women, which is just such a, for such a complex, weird little number, it's such a breath of fresh air amidst this little section of the show for me. We get a Titties and Beer, which seems pretty short. Like, we go straight to the Titties und Bier part in the middle, but I don't think it's German this time because we're in Belgium. And then we get a nice little Do Declare jam at the end. I do declare, well, we just kind of ride that out for a while. Black Napkins, we get, and unfortunately, this is the last Black Napkins of the tour. Or at least I believe it's the last Black Napkins. I think it changes for good. But on the next show, the one I talk about next, right when we get into the solo section, Jobson gets the first solo. Prior to this, including this show, which I believe it's the last time this happened, Frank takes the solo. And because Frank takes the solo, he's already playing the main theme. He's already like dropping licks that, you know, throughout the like head portion of the song. So when we get to the solo section and Frank takes his solo first, he already has all this built up momentum. And so usually these Black Napkin solos start off really aggressive and go that way for like a minute and a half. And then Frank kind of pulls things back and like lowers the temperature and like rebuilds it up so he can finish his solo. This is the last time this happens, I believe. I don't think it happens again. Really aggressive solo straight out of the gates, just like I talked about. He builds the energy up, then he brings it back down, but it's still kind of heavier than some of the earlier Black Napkins. We're not really getting near Pink Napkins territory, anything like that. And there is a point while Frank is soloing, you can hear Ray White's rhythm guitar in the mix, which is something that's not has been present a lot. Really cool. It's a good solo. It stays pretty even keeled. Like the aggression gets aggressive, but not too aggressive. We kind of drop it down a little, but not too far down. So it's a pretty even keel solo. The stuff Bozio is doing is just fantastic the entire way through. Just another excellent solo. That then goes into an Eddie Jobson violin solo. Every single night, these are highlights of every single show. He is ridiculous. And there are times it just sounds like electricity. Just sounds like just pure energy, just going crazy in the arena. Absolutely amazing. And the way O'Hearn and Bozio support those solos, fantastic. And then he always brings it back down before we get into like the return to the main theme. So that way everything gets kind of chill and the Frank will come in, maybe drop a few licks and be like, do-do-do. We go back into it. And then we usually end, we go into the encores, we get a Dynamo Hum. And then we get a Willie the Pimp. This is one of 5 that would be played in this tour. I think all on this tour, but at least in 77. I think over the course of this tour. Just Frank, I think it's Frank, tears into that riff. Da, na, 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 na. And once we get to the vocal part of the song, this is the same arrangement that you can hear on You Can't Do That on Stage 4, the 84 arrangement. You can't be beat, she can't be beat. She's so sweet, she can't be beat. So it's got that like vocal rearrangement thing. We drop into a solo, pretty good solo. Ray's doing his best Captain Beefheart impersonation during like the main vocals before we get to the she's so sweet, she can't be beat. Third party check. I just don't like that. I don't like that part. It kind of works in 84 because of their vocal prowess. And it just falls in line with everything else they do on 84, but very bluesy vibe to this solo. A lot of riffing early where Frank's just kind of riding, an idea and like waiting to jump off into solo. But it's got a very bluesy vibe. And yeah, the first part of it doesn't even really feel like a solo as much as just Frank is up there jamming along with the guys. And then finally he just kind of takes off. And again, the Bozio Frank Zappa connection is strong. I wish it was longer, but it's nice and arena rock and bluesy and high energy, and it's fun to hear. It's a good solo. And then we get a Camarillo Brillo Muffin Man to close out with some really nice riffage in the Muffin Man. So pretty strong show. Highlights are the solos, really aggressive Torture, pretty even keel but aggressive Black Napkins, kind of all over the place pound. Then a really nice, satisfying Willie the Pimp. And then the next show we have is in 2 days later on January 30th, 1977. That was the 28th show. Weissbaden, Germany. Great sound. Probably the best sounding tape on here from this tour. Unfortunately, the only time the sound does get a little murky is during the guitar solos, where everything just gets a little too chaotic and you wish Frank's guitar was higher in the mix. But that's really the only complaint. Purple Lagoon, it's going to be good because Frank's already dropping a solo, short little licks in the Purple Lagoon. Peaches, great balance of the instruments. That's what makes this work, is you have a really good balance of what's being played in the sound. So you can hear Jobson's key really well. You can hear most of the instruments of the band. The Torture, nice and patient. We kind of tiptoe into a nice clean solo. He gets really weird in here, and he drops some weird spacey, echoey effects, and things are getting really kind of trippy, psychedelic, but in a light, pleasant way. We kind of build intensity in like increments, and it feels like he's looking for that like ultimate groove to ride during a lot of points, and things slowly getting more intense, and then he finally, just before he's like dun dun dun. You're like, oh, we're back here. It might be, I think, one of the shortest Torture solos thus far of the tour, I think is what I wrote. But yeah, it's really short. It's still pretty good. But yeah, that weird spacey echoey thing, that effect that he drops on it early in the solo is pretty interesting. We get a Big Leg Emma. We get a City of Tiny Lights, really, really, really high energy Ray solo, really high energy performance of the song. The first half seems almost chaotic, really interesting O'Hearn solo. And then when they return to the song proper during the end, Frank's like essentially pulling a Jerry Garcia and just like dancing around the verses and soloing through that whole thing, much as like Jerry does in like any Bob song for the most part. And it's nice. And then they just kind of ride the song out until Frank's like, oh, we're done. Let's go into the next thing. We get a Pound for a Brown. And this Pound for a Brown is just, even though the sound gets a little bit muddied, this solo is absolutely just amazing. Phenomenal. Early on, Frank has more weird sound effects on his guitar that at first I thought it was like a weird Jobson keyboard solo. He's playing a lot of chords, almost like he's doing like a rhythm guitar solo, as he likes to do every so often. But it has just weird herky-jerky, almost like somebody hitting like weird synth noises. Really strange start to this, but that's kind of like what this Pound for a Brown vehicle feels like. It feels like it's a vehicle for taking chances and exploring and doing stuff like that. He eventually kind of heads into a more normal tone for this. Still a lot of that rhythmic sort of like playing. And then finally he kind of digs in for a couple minutes, gets low, gets dirty, starts playing a lot of like low end notes and kind of playing around up there for a while. And every time you think, oh, right, that was pretty cool, that was a good peak, he just keeps going and going and going and like experimenting different places on the fretboard and different tones and different Bozio and O'Hearn are doing fantastic stuff. At one point, we get that that sort of bass progression that ends the jam on the stage 4 Pound for a Brown. That sort of, I think it's like a really slow, like descending of 4 notes. They're just like boom, and it kind of just gives us like building sound over and over again. We fall into that groove, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, this thing is long, energetic, dynamic, playful, fantastic solo. Like one of the best solos of the tour so far, I would say. Drums, Joan Crusher, my guitar, which sounds absolutely fantastic. You can hear, I think, the entire song better than in any other performance we have so far. The solo is just screaming straight out the gate. Trying to Grow a Chin. Frank's messing around a little bit at the end, but we don't really get much there. Broken Hearts. You can hear what O'Hearn is saying in those little interjections better than I think on any other tape. We get a Dong Work, Manx, Titties. Frank's making fun of Terry for wearing the mask, talking about whether anybody even understands this because it's in English and all that stuff. Then we get a Black Napkins, and Jobson goes first, which means that when Frank goes, he's got to start from scratch, which he's really good at. But I really like him taking the momentum out of the head and then dropping it down and kind of rebuilding in the middle. Jobson solo is amazing. It almost sets the bar so high that I don't think Frank beats him on this one. I think Frank goes, Jobson peaks, we go super chill, bring it all down with Jobson still soloing. Frank kind of steps in. It's your typical patient, build up your, build the energy, let it go, mess around with like these lighter, jazzier, like thinner tones for a while. We're not quite Pink Napkins territory, but we're there. Starts building the momentum. He digs in, gets aggressive, but it's like from 0 to 60, where all of a sudden, okay, now we're going to get aggressive. And then this one ends pretty short too. I think the Torture solo is pretty short. I think this is probably the shortest Black Napkins Frank solo we've had so far on this tour. Then we get a Dynamo Hum, and then we get the very last until the Halloween 81 release, that November 1st show, in which it would reappear for the first time since this show, and I'm the Slime. And Frank's involved from the beginning. He's kind of dropping solos in the opening dun-dun-dun-dun part. Nice aggressive solo, really nice heavy rhythmic stomp by like O'Hearn and Bozio. They figured this song out by this point. Unfortunately, they wouldn't play it again. So, yeah. This is a really good show, and it sounds better than every other show, definitely, that I've listened to. And I'm pretty sure my memory's right. This is the best sounding show of the tour. And I think it's worth checking out. I think the Pound for Pound solo is clearly the highlight. And even though the Napkins and Torture solos are shorter, they're still good solos. But yeah, if I had to rank these 2 tours among the other 8, they're exactly in the middle. Exactly in the middle. I mean, the other ones, there are some Cruising for Burger solos that elevate. There are some better Black Napkin solos, even though the sound might be worse on some of those other ones. the music itself is better. And really, being able to hear O'Hearn better is going to lift up a show some, because O'Hearn, in no matter what he's doing, is just ridiculous on this tour. But I have it right there in the middle. I think the 28th is a little bit higher, mainly because that Willie the Pimp is pretty exciting. The Black Napkins is stronger. The Pound is always good. But yeah, I would have it 4. Yeah, 4 and 5. Right? That's cool. I'm good with that. All right. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Give me your thoughts on these shows, on Zappa, on 77, things I messed up on. You know how those things work. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.